Hey guys, it's Barrett with the Camping Camper. Welcome to Norris Dam State Park. This is one of the first places, it's actually the first place that I ever made a campground review video. And boy, that was back in 2018. And those videos, they were lacking a little bit, especially in the audio department. So, I figured it was time to revisit Norris Dam, kind of see where we were before, see where we're at now. And oddly enough, our experiences over the last 2 or 3 years have changed kind of the recommended sites that I always recommend and stuff like that. And so, today we're just gonna go through everything again. If you have any interest in watching that old video, I am gonna post it up here in the corner and it'll be in the description. Somehow that thing's got 5,000 views in 3 years. I don't even know how, because I can't stand to hardly watch it myself. But if you wanna help a little bit, you can go up there and watch that old video. Let's start with a brief overview of the park. The park is on over 4,000 acres of land, and according to Tennessee State Parks website, they do have 800 miles of shoreline here. It's a very large campground. There's actually a campground on both sides of the dam, and the dam and the lake separate the park in half. And so on the upper half, you have the West Campground, and on the lower half, you have the East Campground. Both of these campgrounds are great in their own way, and I'm going to walk you through that here in just a minute. As far as cell service, with Verizon, we have 2 bars of 4G LTE, and those 2 bars are getting us about 3 download, I believe. And with the AT&T FirstNet that we recently started using for our internet, we have 3 bars, and those 3 bars are getting us about 20-21 download. So let's talk a little bit about the West Campground. The West Campground is actually the one that I prefer. It is about 50 sites. Now these sites have their pros and cons, and we'll go over that in just a second. But each site does have electric and water. There are no sites in the West Campground, where I believe the East Campground was sewer. And that's not a big deal for us at all. The West Campground is more of the camping in the woods type feel. There's more trees and stuff around there. There is a very handicap accessible bathroom there. It's the new style where it's climate controlled, and the bathhouse is right in the center of the loop. And it does have 4 individual private bathrooms in there with a sink, a toilet, and a shower. The West Campground, like I say, is my preferred area to stay in. I will say that it does have some cons along with it. One of the cons is it is on top of a mountain back there, and so the very mound tip of the mountain is the center of the campground loop. And so because of this, all of the campsites that are in the center of the loop are decently unlevel. Now I will say that all the campsites that are on the outside of the loop are fairly level as far as the parking place, and then it gets pretty unlevel going off of that. So if you have like a pop-up camper, a camper van, or something like that, those aren't going to be bad sites for you. Now I will say that those center sites, because it is all mounded off there, there's no leveling or anything, some of those sites are worse than others. But a couple of those Class A's, and they don't look too bad when you first look at them. Some of them have like railroad ties around them where they're kind of dug out a little bit. But some of those Class A's that are in there, you start looking and they're all auto leveled, and their front tires are 4 inches off of the ground. So that just shows you just a small example of how unlevel the area is. The smaller the rig that you have, the obviously easier time you're going to have getting level here. When you turn off into the west area of the park and go to the campground, when you get to the road where you're going to turn off of that and go to the campground, which is very easy to get to, by the way, from exit 128 on I-75. There's just a couple of decent grades going up there, but nothing real bad driving up to this area. But whenever you turn off to go into the park, you're going to turn left to go into the West Campground. Now there is a sign there warning you that it's going to be some steep grades and sharp curves, and to use caution in this area. And so for that reason, if you're not real confident in your towing setup, you might want to stay at the East Campground, which those sites are going to be flatter, but we're going to talk about all that in just a minute. I do have some footage of driving back to the West Campground. I'm going to overlay that in the video here, and it's just going to show you that some of the curves are pretty sharp in there. The grades are kind of harsh in some areas, especially when you get almost to the end where you're at the campground. I actually remember my half-ton truck where I had gotten to almost the end and it had been raining, and there's one curve there that's pretty sharp with a pretty steep grade at the end. And I actually remember sliding around a little bit in my truck, and I had to put it in four-wheel drive in order to get all the way to the top. Now, as you get to the campground, there is a little store there called the Canteen. They usually do sell firewood there. It is only open seasonally, so it's not open right now because this is mid-November at the moment. I'll also say that there's a dump station right there across from the Canteen. Now, this dump station, the curve around there to get to the dump station is pretty harsh, so you need to keep that in mind whenever you go back to the dump station, but I think that most rigs would be able to do it, but you're just gonna have to be careful. Now, there are some other amenities over in this west area, but they're not right near the campground, so you're still gonna have to drive a mile or so to get to each one of these areas. Now, I will say on that road, there is a cemetery. I stopped by there. That seemed to be pretty neat and interesting. One of the tombstones that I found said that it was from 1922. Just past that, going toward the campground, there is a turnoff there. It's pretty steep grade. I didn't realize how steep it was until I was coming out of there. I didn't have to use four-wheel drive, but it says that there's a fishing cove down in there. I will say that the area didn't look too inviting because they had a fence put up there and half of the fence is torn down. So it kind of makes it look like it's not that welcoming because you're not supposed to be there. But when you look down at the water, there is a bench there. Now, there's no swimming. That's one negative thing that I have to say about the park here is they don't have anywhere for you to swim other than this large swimming pool, which we'll get to in just a second. But as far as in the lake, on the river, there's nowhere to swim. They do have a marina here that you can rent a pontoon boat or a houseboat or something like that, but there's no actual swimming area on the natural water here in this park that I found anyway. Now, if you go back to that main road from the West Campground and you turn left, you're going to get to the swimming pool, which is very large. We did enjoy that last time that we were here, as well as the visitor center, which is in front of the swimming pool. If you go on past the visitor center, there is a pull off to the left, and I just saw a sign. You don't really know that it's there, but there are a couple of tennis courts there and a basketball court. And if you keep going down that road, there are some cabins back in that area. So now we're going to focus our attention on the east side of the campground. So when you come out there, out of the west loop, and you turn left on the main highway here, you're actually going to go and you're going to get to this area. Actually, where we're standing here is called the West Overlook. There's a sign out front that says TVA West Overlook. And if you want to, you can stop over here. You can take some pictures of the dam from a bird's eye view. It's a pretty nice area. Then if you want to keep driving down the road actually turns into the dam, and you go over across the dam and end up on the east side. Now over there's a visitor center. I thought the visitor center was very nice, but it is closed at the moment. But they have some maps and all that stuff, some plaques that are very interesting over there, as well as it's closer to the substation. There are 2 generators within the dam that they still use to this day to make power. And also over at the visitor center, I thought it was really neat. They had a charging station for like cell phones and stuff that was solar powered. But as nice as it was, I want to say, you know, it's not very helpful because some idiots went through and cut all the connectors off of the cords. And so I don't understand that. And I wish that people could just not destroy stuff, but that's human nature, and parks constantly deal with that kind of crap all the time. Now, across from the visitor center, you're going to cross the highway there, and there's a little one-way loop. It's very small. There are some parking areas there, but the road that goes to the east campground goes off of that. So I will say, if you're going to the east campground, it's easier to navigate than the west campground because you don't have the grades and the steep curves and all that. I will say that a lot of the sites over there, while being gravel, which I don't care about, they are more level, and a lot of bigger rigs actually tend to end up going over there. I'll say the negative aspects to going over there is, number one, that main road where you go in, you don't have any shoulder space on the road. The road's pretty narrow and it is a little bit curvy. Also have some footage of that I'm going to play here. But all in all, it's easier to get to than the west side campground. But the sites are closer together for the most part. I'll also say that if you're camping in a tent, it's probably going to be better for you over there, because all those smaller sites that are at the West Campground, like I say, the parking pads are decently level, but there's nowhere that's level for you to put a tent in the grass or anything like that. If you don't need power, especially, they have some primitive sites over the East Campground. Some are up like on top of the hill with a good overlook that don't have a lot of shade, and some of them are back in the woods. Another con to the East Campground is that the bathhouse isn't as new. It's not been renovated like the one at the west side where you have the individual stalls and such, I don't believe. But there are a lot of nice things over there in that area. There's a couple of nice playgrounds. They're not right inside the campground like they are over in the west side, but they are close by. There's a couple of nice playgrounds. They have a couple of pavilions, picnic pavilion type things over there. They do have a venue that they rent out. I think a lot of people use that for weddings and such. I believe that the front of that overlooks the lake and has a real nice view, but I've never been there personally. Now, once you come out of the campground loop, if you turn right in there, you do go down to some more cabins that they have down here at the park. In those cabins, in my opinion, if I was going to stay in a cabin, I'd probably stay at the ones on the east side because they are closer to everything else, and they have more of that like rustic cabin feel just when you're driving through. So this is the area that my wife's from, so we have a lot of sentimental reasons to come here. She really likes it here. I will say that if your goal is to go swimming in the lake, you're probably going to be better off at Loyston Point. I'll have that up in the description here. But if you want just some nice state park camping, this is going to be a great area for you. And I've let you in on all the things that are my pros and cons here. And I do still have to give you the sites that we're going to recommend, and we'll get into those in just a second. I will say first that this area is about 30 minutes north of Knoxville, so you're pretty close to things. You're about 8 or 10 minutes away from Clinton, which has a Walmart and some shopping and restaurants and stuff there. And so, you know, it's really a nice area to go to if you want to be relatively close to the city, but still have that outdoor camping feel. Some other things that you can do in the area is you can canoe right near the east entrance. There is a area that you can drive down by the water. There's a gazebo down there. There's a canoe put in down there. Now, I will say if you drive down the road just a little bit, as far as the water flows, there's about a mile later, I think it was called Weir Dam, and it's about a 3-foot drop off. Now, looking on the GPS, it looks like there's a water tributary that goes a little bit behind that's different. So I'm assuming you can take a canoe back there and avoid this drop off, because why else would they have a canoe put in? But that's something that you're going to want to research before you go put a canoe or something in there, because it's a decent drop off there. I will also say that there's the grist mill and the thresher barn that's just down the road from that a little ways. I'm going to try to stop in there. I stopped in the other day and there's a whole bunch of people down there, so I didn't stop. But I'm going to try to go stop here in a minute, take some pictures of that. It's just an area here where there's a lot of history and a lot of things to do. There's also the Museum of Appalachia that is on this same main road. If you pass the East Campground, it's going to be almost to the main highway. Actually, the main entrance is on the main highway there, but you'll see the signs. You know, it's just something nice to do. It's a nice area and I highly recommend it. All right, guys, so the last part of this video is always the sites that I would recommend. And if you're going to come here, I didn't have my recommended sites for the East Campground here. Those should probably be the same as my previous video, and I'll link those up here. But I'm going to tell you that all these sites are in the West Campground. They are all going to be nose down decently. And so you're just going to have to know that it's not going to be level before you get there. And you know, they're not as level as what I would like, but it is a great campground and a great area. And I'll say that the handicap sites that they have, they are all very decently level. They're still nose down, but they have good concrete around there. And a lot of them, like we're inside, I believe 41, and it has actually a sidewalk that goes from the camping area to the bathrooms. And so, you know, you can't ask for a whole lot more than that. I will say that 41 is still, if you look at my landing gear, the front's extended quite a bit and the back's not anywhere near as tall because it's nose down. But it does have like a dovetail at the end of the site where it is a little bit more of a slope there. So that tries to take away a lot of the slopiness of the site itself. So as far as the sites that I recommend, I'm going to say site 50, site 4, site 20, site 10, and site 35. As I say, all these sites aren't going to be very level, but they're all very nice sites. You're going to have a little bit more yard space in these sites, and that's why I recommend them. Now, one that almost made this list until I started looking at the camper that was there a little bit closer was site 29. Site 29 is a very nice site. It's kind of at the end of the loop, and so you have like the largest front yard. Granted, the loop does kind of go through there, so you're going to see some cars go through there a bit, but you're going to have the most privacy there probably. But I will say that I'm going to say avoid it because of the unlevelness side to side, because these guys, after I started looking at their steps, they had blocks and blocks and blocks underneath their steps so that they would reach the ground, and had to have an additional stool there, which sometimes is something that you run into. But because of that, I would say avoid that site altogether. But thanks guys for watching this video. Thanks for sticking with us through these 3 years. Thanks for the continued growth, and just thanks for supporting the channel. We'll see you guys on the next adventure.
Don't forget to hit that subscribe button.